Hello there, my name is Jean Weeb and I would like to talk to you about some little creatures that live all over our earth. Insects, bugs, live on every continent. Even the very extreme cold and very extreme hot parts of our earth have insects living on them. You've probably walked around in your backyard and have seen lots of different insects, and you may have even gotten a magnifying glass and looked at them very closely. You may have caught a few in a jar and watched them for a day and then turned them loose again. They are very interesting creatures and they're very important to life on our planet. We have a lot of insects that hide easily because of the way they look. Can you see the bug in this picture? This is a Ranger Rick. Love Ranger Rick magazines. Ranger Rick has beautiful close-up pictures. Look at this one. And more and more. There are insects that are beautiful colors. We have insects that are very helpful in gardens. There are people with gardens who buy ladybug eggs and who buy praying mantis eggs to put in their garden so that they'll hatch there and live their lives there. Do you know why? Because they eat harmful bugs that would hurt our garden plants, and so they are very helpful to us. This is a book on grossology, animal grossology. One of the little bugs that we can study is the beetle, the burying beetle. This is something that I enclosed in lamination, and it has a picture of an actual live burying beetle. This one is a drawing. One of the things that happens all the time out in forests and in deserts and in rivers and everywhere on the earth is that animals have to eliminate waste. And when they do that, there are so many animals, wild, in all parts of the earth, that there's quite a mess to clean up. If we didn't have some mechanism, some system for cleaning up that mess, just think of what our earth would smell like and look like. So we have this very handy little beetle. We don't like to think about what job he does, but he does a very helpful job. He and his friends rush to a place where an animal has used the bathroom, and they grab that material and roll it up into little balls. Balls that are even bigger than themselves. Here's an actual photograph. And they roll it up. Then they get on one side of it on the ground with their feet up on the ball and push. And they can roll that material off as far as they want. Some of them roll this for quite a ways. Some of it is tiny little blobs. Some of it is bigger than the beetle. And they bury it and they lay an egg in it. And that provides food for their babies when they hatch. So, as yucky a job as this is, these little bugs do a great job with it and clean up the mess for the rest of us. So when we go walking through the forest, we don't have to step in all that stuff. Ants are very important to the ecology of the earth. They're important to the soil itself. They dig in it, they add air to it, they loosen it up, and there are ants all over the world. Many, 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 many kinds of ants, and they all do different jobs. Some of them cut leaves and make nests out of their leaves. Some of them make hills that are very, very high. I'll bet you could go to a library and find magazines and books that would show different kinds of ants and the way that they live. When an ant is traveling around. When it finds a source of food, it goes back to carry the food back to its ant hill or its ant home, and it leaves a little trail so that other ants can travel back along that same path and get some of the same food and take it back also. We have so many different kinds of insects that it's never boring. It's always very interesting to find some new kinds of insects to study. These are toy insects that I'm showing you here, but you can find the real things and actually watch how they walk, how they get their food, where they live, how they make their homes, how they reproduce, how they help other animals, or how they help mankind. This is a plastic egg, and I looked for a picture of a termite and tried to make a little model of it. A termite is an insect that we don't like to find in our houses because termites eat wood. A termite has something very special about him. A termite eats wood, but he can't digest it. A termite gets it inside his body, but his body cannot get the nutrients out of the wood that his body needs to live. What a problem. Well, here's the solution. A termite has inside his body a bunch of little microscopic varmints, and I just made some of these little pieces to illustrate. The little microscopic living things inside the body of a termite can digest the wood, and when it passes through their bodies and goes through some chemical changes, then what comes out of their bodies is used for food by the termite. This is called a symbiotic relationship. Can everybody whisper that to your neighbor? Symbiotic relationship. It means that they need each other in order to live. So the termite eats the wood. He's big enough to go places and get into places where there's wood and chew it up and swallow it. The little living things inside are microscopic, and they don't have any way to get the wood that they need for nourishment. The termite has no other way to get the nourishment that he needs. So his body uses the material after it has passed through the little bodies of the microscopic organisms in there. One question that people always think about is, how did this happen? How did a termite and a bunch of microscopic living things decide to do this? Somehow it happened. We need to think about how many perfect situations there are on the earth for living things. So we have a very, very, very perfect system. Everything that lives on the earth is provided for with claws or mouths or antenna or parts to their bodies that provide for all of their needs. And all of the things that live on the earth are important in the food chain. Here's a picture of a bee. It's doing an important job for plants. You see all that yellow powdery stuff that's all over the legs of the bee? He gets pollen on his feet so that when he goes to the next flower, that material rubs into the next flower also. And plants can't travel from one place to another to share this pollen that is important for them to be able to make seeds. So bees and other bugs, lots of other bugs, do a very, very important job for these flowers. And other plants, lots of crop plants and food plants have to have this material carried from plant to plant to plant in order to be able to make seeds, in order to be able to make the food that we eat. A corn plant has to have material carried from other corn plants in order to be able to fertilize it and form the grains of corn. And bees and other bugs do that job. It's a very, very important part of the way that plants operate, and insects help them. So the insects are getting their food from the plants, and they're fertilizing parts of the plants that need it by carrying this pollen from one place to another. Bees make cells that have a very special shape, a hexagon shape. Can you see the six-sided cells in this hive? Can you see that those cells have six-sided shapes? A six-sided shape is called a hexagon, a six-sided figure. Here's a triangle. Honey is very, very heavy. And if honey just sat on the bottom of the triangle, the bottom could break. It's the only surface holding all that weight, and it could just break and collapse. But look at the hexagon. The way that this fits together distributes the weight against different surfaces. When people have tried to find a shape to make little parts for structures like for the wings of airplanes, they have experimented with different kinds of shapes to be efficient, to not waste any space, to all fit together perfectly, and to be very, very strong so that they could take a great deal of pressure. They eventually came to the conclusion that a hexagon was the strongest shape. Well, bees have always known this. Since bees have existed, bees have made hexagon-shaped cells. The very oldest rocks on the earth have beehives that have hexagon-shaped cells. So it's not something that bees learned to do. If they had started out with a different shape and had tried that, if bees could think that way, what would have happened to that very first beehive? The thing would have collapsed, and those bees would not have had their food, and they would have died. So this is something that was built into the bees. When bees go out to find food, they go to a flower, and when they find a place to get a lot of pollen, they can load up their little pollen sacs and go back to the hive, and they can do a little figure-8 style dance. And the way that they wiggle, the way that they dance, tells the other bees in the hive where they went, what direction they went, and how far it was. And those other bees can go out. That way they're going from the same to the same flowers. When they start out with one kind of flower, if they go to daisies or to roses, they stay with that kind of flower so that they're not mixing daisy pollen with rose pollen. They're not mixing the kinds of pollens. They stay with the same kind of flower before they go back to the hive with all of that pollen. And that's another thing that they know how to do that helps plants. Everything that we look at turns out to be working perfectly. You've probably studied butterflies. I love to look at dragonflies. We have so many different kinds of bugs, insects, and if we study those, every single one of them has designs that are perfect. They have ways of finding food and places that they live, and there are bugs that can live where it's very, very cold because their blood does not freeze. It is so neat to study the things in the world that are perfect, because then we know that there was design behind all of that, that there was a purpose to all of that. We have a book right here called Dandy Designs, and it's interesting to read, along with lots of other materials that you can find that tell us more and more about the world in which we live and how perfect it is. I would like for you to think about something that you're interested in, some kind of bug that you enjoy watching, and go to your library or your encyclopedias and see if you can find out some interesting facts about the way that that animal lives. And share it with a friend. Bring it back to your group that you're in right now and see if other people know the things already that you have been able to find out. That would be really neat. And keep on studying all of the things around you to see how perfect our creation is.